IFFR, we are going to talk about the sixth film from this year's competition, and it's a film by a Chilean filmmaker. It's called Ray, and I think it has a special connection with IFFR because it was even supported by Hubert Balsfond.
Yes, I was in a lucky position to read the script way before it was shot, of course, and to be honest, I thought, how the hell is this going to be a film?
Fantastic.
Because it was so out there, it was so daring that I really want to see how this film will work. It could fail completely. It has people with masks in it. It has deteriorated archive footage in it. It has a weird story that is somehow true, yet it's told from different angles, so it's like a fable. And it all comes together beautifully. I mean, talk about ambitions in filmmaking. I think Ray is it.
Thank you.
Parece que perdimos rumbo. Vamos a tener que volvernos un poquito, señor Antonio. Ahí tomamos la otra huella, porque para acá nos vinimos muy para el este. ¿Francés?
¿Qué es eso? No sé, a lo mejor fue el ejército, para asustar a los indios.
¡Por la independencia de la Araucanía!
Orly Antoine de Tonnans. Para estos crímenes tan graves como perturbar el orden público y alta traición contra el Estado de Chile, pedimos su ejecución. ¿Tiene algo que decir en su defensa?
Desapareció. Pero no se ha apoderado de nosotros. Soy un arcángel. O un cadáver.
Good morning, Niles Atallah, the director of the film Ray that has been included into 46 International Film Festival competition Tiger Award. You are not a newcomer to Rotterdam. Your film has been shown. Your film Lucia, the first film, was shown in Rotterdam, and your second film Ray was actually supported also by Hubert Balsfond.
That's right.
I was wondering, the story of the film follows. It's actually based on a true story, as I read, of a noble Frenchman who wanted to make an independent kingdom of Araucania and Patagonia.
Yes.
Tell us please something about the story. How did you find it, and why was it so attractive for you to start a film about it?
Well, the story of Orly Antoine de Tonnans is very unique, I think, and I ran across it many different times in Chile. It's a story that's known by quite a few people, but just a very short version of the story. Most people have heard his name very vaguely, and they know that they relate him with the idea of this king, this kind of crazy Frenchman that came in the 19th century. Maybe he got locked up in a mental institution, maybe not. That's about all they know about him. And so I began to research him more, and I found very interesting information about him.
Where was it?
Basically just in used book markets on the street, and also finding old publications that were written about him.
Okay, in library and so.
Yeah,
So there were some records on
there
the
were
story.
some records. The further I dug into the story, more I found. But eventually I came to a kind of standstill, because there are a lot of holes in the story, and there's actually not so much concrete evidence that remains. So there's a lot of people writing about him many years after his death, and there is what he wrote about himself, but there's no version that was written down at the time, of course, by the indigenous population that he came into contact with. On the case near the border of Chile and Araucanía, it was the Mapuche. And further south in Patagonia, many different indigenous groups. There's not a record of what any of these people thought of him at all.
So it might be a fictitious story.
This is what attracted me a lot to it. Is what I realized is that the main thing that is left from him is a version that he tells us and a version that his enemies tell us, which is the Chilean authorities that arrested him and wanted him out. So, to me, this was fascinating, and the fact that there was so many holes in the story and evidence that was very contradictory as well. So as I investigated it, I saw that the way history is created, the narrative of history that we read, is something that has a lot of fictional elements, of course, that come into it. This is something that is quite obvious, I think, but when you actually come in contact with investigating a historical person and seeing how the different historians have made an assumption or made a jump from one thing to another. What we see is like one letter that was found here, another object, something that he wrote, something he said he did on this date, or a letter captured by that was found by somebody in a library. Then these different points, which are like archaeological or forensic evidence, then how we get from point A to point B is really a jump in, it takes a narrative jump, which is very similar to script writing or writing a novel. And the interesting thing is a lot of the books that I read about him, the historians were not really saying, look, this is, we're taking a lot of liberties of where we're going with this story, with the interpretation.
So that's interesting. Thank you for explaining us about your way to the story, how you found it and how you research it. I was wondering, so you are telling a story which is non-linear and very complex in many layers, actually multi-layered. So probably that's also because of this fractal information that you got. So you were trying to find a format to the film, I guess. Can you tell us more how you developed your script, how many stages you went through when you were creating it?
It was a very long process because right now we're about to exhibit it, and it's been 7 years of work.
7 years.
And it has a lot to do with the amount of investigation and the process of filming that went into the script writing as well.
Yeah.
Because it was about 2 years before I actually set pen to paper to work on the script, which was 2 years of investigation of the character, and also old film archives, which was mainly done at I here in
yes,
in
because
Holland.
you are using also found footage.
Yes, lots of found footage. The idea was to make the whole film a kind of archive, so that it would not be a biopic necessarily.
No.
And one that, because what occurred is, as I was investigating, and I saw that there was all of this kind of conflicting evidence, and that the archives, the historical archives, are themselves in a state of deterioration as well. What I was realizing is that the idea to look back in history and to film something that occurred, and to film it as one version, as one kind of definitive version, is really kind of a strange exercise, I think. Because looking back towards history is really not a pure process. It's something that is really contaminated by the way that we look, the way things work today, the way our prejudices, all kinds of different things. As we look back, it's like a dialogue between what occurred, what we think occurred, what we would like to have had occurred, what we're drawn to. All of these different things come into the mix.
So I was thinking you actually took this format to avoid this specific an exact historical interpretation or something.
Yes.
It's more a dream-like sequence about this historical moment, at least for me,
Right.
with the form that you have chosen. So did you build up the story, like did you know already, okay, I'm going to do this interrogation at the court, and then you are then the two characters, who is the Mr. Antoine and Rosales, are actually telling what happens, and then that's acted.
Well, I wasn't very sure at the very beginning what
Okay.
I would be doing, but I let kind of the process of investigating dictate.
Okay.
And I thought I wouldn't just be investigating. I'm not a historian,
No.
and I'm not an anthropologist or a person that works in cultural investigation as well. So I thought I need to work on this from the perspective, from an artistic perspective, from a practice,
Yes.
and to work myself with the material and the character. And so I knew who the actor was. He really inspired me to work on the film as well. And from the very beginning, I was filming him with a Super 8 camera and a Bolex as well, a 16mm camera, and I was bearing this footage that I was shooting of him. And I thought, you know, if I were to make my own archive as well, this archive doesn't exist of him.
Nice,
That was nobody filmed him. The film didn't exist back then, and I thought maybe if I could make my own version and then allow that to deteriorate and then find it again as if it was a real archive.
I was actually thinking about those scenes that you were using, like American avant-garde, like Stan Brakhage, just scratching or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of work on the material itself, because something very important to me in the process was to expose the fact that as we look back at history and as we decide to revise our memory, this is a process that is volatile. It has the thing itself that we're looking back at is in a state of change, and also the vehicle of looking back, our memory or an archive or something, some kind of historical object, this is also in a state of change. It's decaying as well. So all these things, on top of that, the object, the historical object that existed, that exists around it, the entire context around it has changed and has also been displaced or has fallen away, and we don't have access to it anymore. So the material deterioration of the film itself is something that I felt gave a really clear, visceral feeling that this is what was occurring. As you watch old films, you really get a strong feeling of this. It's very different than reading an old or seeing an old document. When you see an old film, you see in movement, you see ghosts, basically. And you see people that are all dead and that are somehow alive before you. They're moving, they're smiling, they're acting, that you can see an emotion that is happening to them, a kind of quotidian action, a daily thing that they're doing, maybe picking up a book or walking across a room. But this person is gone. And you're seeing a shadow of them projected. And this projection, this film is deteriorated. So actually, you can feel the process of time at work, and you can feel it's like they're behind this glass wall. You cannot touch them, and you can feel the passage of time. And if that person on top of it is somebody that you knew and loved, it's even more potent, and there's a very strong sense of nostalgia. So this is like the closest thing I could think of to our dreams, our internal life, our memories. It's like the closest example that we have in the physical world of the way of what happens to our own minds.
Very nice. What about the masks that you are using in the film?
The masks have a lot to do with the fact, with this fetishism, I think, that exists with history, to create objects out of moments and out of ideas or out of people. um, let's take Colonel Saavedra, who was the authority on the border that captured Orly Antoine, the Frenchman. Or take the judge, or take Rosales, the man that was the guide of Orly Antoine and betrayed him, or take Orly Antoine himself. Everybody inevitably in a historical film, it becomes, or in a historical writing, or when you look back at an event, the people involved in it, they become objects. They become like caricatures of something. They become representations of something else, I think. And it's like going to a wax museum and seeing all of these characters frozen, again, like behind glass, dressed in their uniforms or in their suits. And I could imagine seeing Colonel Saavedra, Orly Antoine, Rosales, everybody frozen, turned into characters or caricatures, or turned into objects. Because imagining what really happened, whatever that is, to think that you could really go back and think, okay, this is what really happened, that's very strange to me. Because what really happened is really, really inaccessible. It's really gone, and we have to accept that. And we can look back and say, this is possible that this happened, or there's many different possible exercises we can do. But looking back is always a reflection of what is happening to us now.
I actually appreciated it very much how you did it. I got the feeling of it that you don't want to reenact true happenings.
This is always absurd, and I always imagined it was kind of Dadaist. It was like a futile attempt of making something come alive again that is dead and that cannot come alive. And so these historical people are actually objects, are actually moving objects.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about, maybe the last question, I would like to hear more about the Aboriginals that are playing in your film. Who are they, and how was it, how did you find them, and how was it to work with them?
Well, the Mapuche community that I worked with, they, I came in contact with one of the women of that community many years ago when we were investigating, and I was working on a documentary. I worked actually as a photographer for a documentary. And we went and we interviewed them about something that was occurring at the time in the region. And I saw that they had built a ruca. They had built in where they live is called Flor del Valle, which is in the south of Chile, near the border of Argentina, in the mountains. And they had built a ruca, which is an old, which is a traditional house. Yeah, and they had built it themselves. And this is something that I thought was very interesting, because I really didn't want to recreate myself the time period with the Mapuche. And I really liked the idea that they were in charge of their own representation as far as the way that they lived. Of course, this comes into contact with us and a dialogue with us, with the art director, and with the wardrobe, the different clothes that they wore and everything. And we knew that there would be always a kind of an absurd, a ridiculous touch to this, always. Like everything in the film is not to be taken so seriously as in a traditional period drama.
Of course, yes.
Right? And so everything has this, but there's this dialogue happening between, let's say, the ruca, where we see the Mapuche family living, which was actually built by some of the members of that family themselves.
What about the dialogues that they do? Did you direct them? It seems like they are very, because the language is totally different.
Yes, yes. Well, I had the actor Rosales, that in the film is supposed to speak a little bit of Mapudungun. He actually doesn't speak any, of course, and this I thought would be great, because I wanted his character to not really speak Mapudungun, to be pretending that he could kind of speak it. And so this worked out really well. So I actually had a little blackboard, or actually on the back of the clapper that we used. I wrote different things in Mapudungun that I had translated from a translator, and I asked him to just read them. And he was reading them, trying to pronounce it properly and read. And many of the Mapuche they were laughing at him.
At a certain point,
and
they
saying, you
also
can't
say-
speak
Yeah.
Mapuche and everything.
Yes,
And he wasn't understanding a word that they said.
Okay.
And they basically, I gave them full reign to do whatever
It's
they wanted,
fantastic, yeah.
and just kind of tried to guide it a little bit, cutting in often,
Mm-hmm.
saying, "This is, why don't you make fun of this, or why don't you notice that he's wearing this, or why don't you talk about this?" Making suggestions. But I said, you can speak about what you want. You can make fun of the crew, please. Yeah.
What about, so did they hear about Mr. Anton?
They knew very little about him, just
They
like
did.
basically what most Chileans know about him,
Okay.
is that he was somebody that said he was the king of Araucanía and Patagonia. But if you ask most Mapuches now, there's no king of
But it's
Araucanía.
nice that you gave them the word in the end also in your film.
Yes.
Okay, Niles, thank you so much for this very interesting conversation. We would like to wish you good luck for tonight's premiere, and thank you for coming to Rotterdam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.